my son's teacher weaponized his grief to turn him against me. And what I found on my son's phone made me realize it ran a lot deeper than I ever thought. When my husband died in an ice storm 6 months ago, I thought nothing could hurt worse than watching my 15-year-old son Sean completely shut down, but I was wrong. It all started with Sean failing his classes, and with me working double shifts, I couldn't help. So when Mr. Harrison offered to tutor him after school for free, I nearly cried with relief. He'd show up at our door with Sean when I was stuck at work late, and sometimes he'd even have groceries. The first weird moment happened about 2 months in when I came home early from a shift and found them in Sean's room with the door closed. Nothing inappropriate was happening. They were just studying. But Mr. Harrison looked annoyed when I knocked and asked if they wanted snacks. He said, "Sean really needs to focus right now. Maybe you could rest. You look exhausted." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle, but I pushed it down because I was exhausted and Sean was finally doing better in school. Then came the comments that seemed supportive but felt off. Sean would say things like, "Mr. H says everyone grieves differently," when I tried to get him to talk about his dad. Or, "Mr. H thinks maybe you work so much because you can't face being home." I started noticing Sean pulling away from me more each week, but I blamed it on normal teenage grief, until I overheard him on the phone with his friend saying, "Mr. H explained how mom could have prevented it if she'd just made dad stay home that night." My whole body went cold. I'd begged my husband not to drive in that storm, but Sean had forgotten his science project and was panicking about his grade, so his dad insisted on going. I lied and told Sean he was out getting something for me so he wouldn't carry it. I didn't confront Sean right away, but I did start paying closer attention, and found Sean's notebook where Mr. Harrison had been writing him notes during their sessions. "Your mother prioritized her comfort over your father's safety, and sometimes the surviving parent carries guilt that makes them emotionally unavailable." My hands shook as I read page after page of poison dressed up as grief counseling. I decided to document everything and started volunteering at school to monitor the situation. When Mr. Harrison suggested Sean spend the weekend at his house to work on a project, I politely declined. The flash of rage in his eyes before he composed himself told me everything I needed to know. At parent-teacher conferences, I made a point to publicly thank every teacher except him, and when someone asked why, I simply said, "I believe in thanking those who build my son up, not tear families apart." His face turned purple. Sean must have been watching because he exploded at me in the parking lot screaming, "Mr. H warned me you'd try to turn everyone against him just like you turned dad against us by making him go out that night." Other parents stared as my son accused me of unaliving his father while defending the man who was destroying our family. I kept my voice steady and just said, "I love you, Sean, and I always will." But inside, I was shattering. 3 days later, CPS showed up at my work, pulling me out in front of my colleagues to inform me of an investigation into neglect and emotional abuse. The report filed by a mandatory reporter claimed I was working excessive hours, leaving Sean unsupervised, and that he had expressed fear of my emotional instability. They interviewed Sean at school with Mr. Harrison present as his trusted adult, and my son told them I blamed him for his father's death and that he only felt safe with Mr. Harrison. When the social worker suggested temporary placement and asked Sean where he'd feel comfortable staying, he immediately said, "Mr. Harrison offered to take me in." They'd been planning this for months. I hired a lawyer with money I didn't have and discovered Mr. Harrison had been documenting everything from every time I was 5 minutes late picking Sean up to photos of the grief notes I left in his lunch twisted to look like emotional manipulation. But the real horror came when I finally got hold of Sean's phone after he stormed out. The text messages started innocently enough with, "You can tell me anything, Sean," but over months they progressed to, "Our bond is special, not everyone would understand," and "You're so mature for your age, that's why we connect like this." The most recent ones made bile rise in my throat. "When you're free from her control, we won't have to hide anymore." Sean had been responding with confused messages like, "Is it normal to feel this way about you?" and "Mom would freak if she knew we talked like this." The final message